Okay, so I'm going to get started with the webinar now. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to deliver this webinar on behalf of Inago. And the title of this webinar is Enhancing Your Research Impact via Strategies for Post-Submission Success. And so the goal is to keep the webinar, the slide presentation part of the webinar, approximately 1 hour. And then after that, we'll have some Q&A. So that's the plan here. Okay, so in the beginning, I'd just like to say that this material, it belongs to the company Crimson Interactive or its affiliates. So there are some confidentiality issues, and so don't use this material without gaining permission from the company. So this is just a disclaimer. Please don't use this material without getting permission from the company. Okay. And so at the end, we'll have some Q&A, and plus you can download some resources and also rewatch the webinar later. The organizers from Inago will send you an email later after the webinar ends, maybe even after a few days. So, but this, I'm going to present a live webinar now. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the material. Okay, and also you can post your questions via the chat function, but unless there's some really dire pressing need, we can save most of the chat till the end, the Q&A part. Okay. Okay, and also we're going to be taking a few polls during the webinar, so we'll do that during the process. Okay. Okay, so let's get started with the material. So for reference, my name is James Wicker. I'm very happy to be invited to deliver this webinar and have the opportunity to speak with you all. So I've been working at National Astronomical Observatories, Chinese Academy of Sciences for actually 17 years. And for 15 of those years, I have been doing editorial work for a journal that's based there called Research in Astronomy and Astrophysics. And as part of my editorial duties, mostly I work as an English editor at that journal, but I also interface with authors and I answer author queries or direct author queries to other colleagues. So I have a lot of experience in the editorial field and also trying to help authors disseminate their work. Some other colleagues and I have been, over the years that I've worked at RAA, we've tried to help authors disseminate their work and publicize their work as much as possible. So here is the agenda for the talk. So first, I'm going to introduce what is the significance of research impact and different ways of increasing research impact. And we're going to talk about what are publication extenders and popular publication extenders that potentially create the most impact. So the availability of tools that you can use to increase the impact of your research is much better now that we're living in the era of social networks and online videos, and you have the ability to interact with your audience much better than, for example, the time when I was in graduate school around 20 years ago, when basically all we had was email and physically going to meet the author. So we're going to talk about the new ways that you can promote your research. And then at the end, we'll talk about measuring research impact. And then finally, the last approximately 30 minutes, we'll have a live Q&A session. Okay? So let's jump right in. What is the significance of impact? So research impact, historically, it's basically articles that cite a published article, right? So that contributes to the number of citations that an author accumulates. However, in recent times, especially in the era of fast electronic media, we have much more ways to have a broader impact beyond just academic publishing. And this can even have a relation with funding. For example, funding agencies can look at the broader impact of research. So this illustrates the significance of research impact. And this graphic gives you an idea of how researchers can sort of have a strategy to increase the impact of their research. In addition to citations, improving the visibility of the research, increasing potential collaborations, and taking advantage of new media, and bridging the gap between academia and society, drives innovation and societal progress, and even can have an influence on government policymakers. So in the past, I have worked in both the United States and China, and in the past, I also had the opportunity to meet some government offices that, especially related to funding agencies. And the people in the office told me in both China and the United States that the research people does have an effect on their policy making. So this can have real world effects of your research. Okay, and this slide gives an overview of, we were just talking about funding allocation, key factors in funding allocation. So for example, you can see the 4 A's of research impact assessment. So advocacy, analysis, accountability, and allocation. And people, as a result of their articles, in addition to checking the number of citations an article gets, they might be invited to conferences or make contributions to research community, invitations to speak at conferences, etc. Okay, so this is the first time we're going to try to do a poll. And so this first poll is we're just curious, what aspect of research impact do you prioritize? So citation count, media coverage, policy. Okay, right, so here's the poll, and we're going to do a little poll now. If you can on your computer, just select what are the priorities out of these: citation count, media coverage, policy influence, public engagement, industry collaboration, getting research funds, or maybe all of the above. So, okay. Okay, it looks like, right, we're getting some answers here. Okay. Okay, I think most people, okay, we're still getting some data coming in. Okay, let's say that's the end of, it looks like the data have come in. Okay, according to this, most people, I mean, the most popular one is citation count, and that's not surprising to me because the historically that was true. People paid the most attention to citation count. And then the second most popular is industry collaboration. Okay. And then everyone, right. Okay. So everyone got at least one vote except all of the above. Okay, good. Okay. So now we're back to the slides. Yes. Okay. Okay, yes, back to the slides. Okay, so now we're going to talk about different ways of increasing research impact. Okay, so this graphic illustrates an example of a schedule in a year someone might like to try to publish their research. And we're going to compare the traditional way, for example, around 20 years ago when I was in graduate school, the route people followed versus now. And under the traditional way, um, for example, if this researcher collects their data in February, they can write an abstract to a conference in March, and then in June they can present at a conference, for example, give an oral presentation. And then maybe later in the summer, they might go to another conference, but they don't get their publication until September. And also in September, they'll write their plain language summary. And we're going to talk some about also plain language summary later in the slides. But now we have so many more avenues to publish research. This really speeds up the cycle, and it's much more efficient in terms of disseminating research. So for example, now we can start also, if the data are available in February, then we can move up the publication date because the cycle of publication is a lot faster. And the person can even produce a video abstract, an author video, infographic. We're going to talk about all these in a little while. In the summer, and plain language summary. And so they already have their publication and they've already introduced the community to their research results. And then even in this year, they have the opportunity to do some secondary analyses. So for example, this graphic just illustrates how much faster the publication process is now compared to in the past, and how many more options researchers have to disseminate their research via different means and engage a lot more readers to learn about their research. Okay. Okay. So before we get into the different ways of that people can publish their research, I want to mention potential drawbacks of using AI to create research impacts. So within about the last 2 years, AI chatbots have become very popular around the world. And AI chatbots mean that, okay, okay, okay. Can you all see the slides now? Okay. Yes. Yes. Good. Okay. So, like I was saying, over the last few years, the AI chatbots have become um, very popular. They have a lot of practical uses that you can see even on different websites. There are AI chatbots to help users, which frees up resources of the humans associated with that website. However, in this context, people really have to be careful when using AI chatbots because the AI does not necessarily understand. In fact, it generally does not understand the research as well as the human does. And so it can't necessarily express all the correct terms or language as well as especially the person conducting the research. And even it can give incorrect um, incorrect information. In fact, on most AI chatbots, before you start using it, you have to click that you agree that not all the information that it produces will necessarily be correct. Well, when you're trying to disseminate your research, you want the text there to be as correct as possible, right? So, what this slide is just saying is that I mean, you can use AIs to generate at least the outline of an article if you're writing an article or to aid you in planning an article. But beyond that, be very cautious when using AI because it doesn't necessarily produce correct results. Okay. And even there are ethical considerations. And especially the AI may not be able to adapt to the different audiences that you want to present your research to. And we're going to talk more about that aspect in just a few minutes, about how you potentially have to change your language to different audiences. Okay, so now we're going to discuss publication extenders. What are publication extenders? So publication extenders, also known as publication enhancers, are strategies and resources that can help researchers increase the impact of their research beyond traditional academic publishing. So, for example, the reach now, because of all the new media, are way beyond what was in the past. And this allows the researcher to engage more with their audience and hopefully have more of an impact on their research. Okay, so this slide just gives an overview of different types of publication extenders, and we'll briefly introduce them. Graphical abstracts, video abstracts, plain language summaries, and we'll talk more about each of these later in the talk. Infographics, research press release, and academic social networking. Okay, so these are all ways that researchers can promote their research that are beyond what was available more than a decade ago. Okay, and why would someone want to develop publication extenders? To increase the visibility and discoverability of their research, effective communication, broader impact, engagement and collaboration, and increased citations. So in the most ideal case, this sort of forms a feedback loop, right? So When we just took the poll, the number one choice of what people were interested in were citations. Of course, historically, that's the number one way people measure research. However, in this sort of ecosystem, you want to have a feedback loop where your broader impact will also increase your citations, right? So it sort of creates a nice ecosystem that can promote your research. Okay, popular publication extenders that create the most impact. Okay, so here we're going to do another quick poll. And which of the following will, just out of curiosity, would you choose to achieve the highest impact? So let's see if we can do another poll here. Okay. And right, we're going to use the software to do the poll. If you can choose, okay. That was from the previous poll. Okay, still public citation counts are still the number one choice. Okay. Okay, so now you can choose graphical abstract, video abstract, plain language summary, research, press, infographics. Okay, and the data have started to come in. Journal cover art, academic social networks, and all of the above, potentially. I mean, maybe you have a really advanced ecosystem that covers all of these, okay, or others. Okay, so you can make your choice now and we'll see what the most popular choice is. Okay, looks like research, press release, yes. Right, and academic social networking. Okay, these are currently tied. Okay, journal cover art. The journal where I work, we've done several journal cover arts. I mean, that especially works mostly for printed cases. Okay, I think that's might be the end of our poll. Okay, so we have a tie between research press release and academic social networking. Okay, yes, social networking is popular. Okay, so let's go back to the slides now. Okay, so okay, great. So okay, you can see the slide okay? All right. Okay, so right. Okay, so when Inago conducted the same poll to researchers, the results showed that the number one most popular choice was graphical abstracts. And we're going to show some examples of graphical abstracts. Graphical abstracts convey a lot of information in a small area. So they're very efficient as far as conveying graphic information. And then the next most popular choice was all of the above. The least popular choice was video abstracts. And when I saw this result, I thought that maybe the reason video abstracts were the least popular choice was because it takes more effort to produce a video potentially if you don't have a background, especially in producing videos, but maybe we can talk more about that in the Q&A section. So, okay, so next we're going to we're going to introduce each of these individually and give examples. Okay, let's start off with the graphical abstract. So a graphical abstract is a single, concise visual representation of the main findings or key points of a research article or scientific paper. It serves as a quick, visually appealing summary of the work and is designed to help readers quickly grasp the core message of the research. So the ability to attract a viewer's attention is really important here because, for example, at a conference, there may be hundreds of other participants or potentially even thousands. I've even attended a conference in Beijing where there were 8,000 participants. I mean, I wasn't presenting a paper there or anything. I just listened to talks. But you can imagine 8,000 participants. It's pretty hard to stand out of the crowd there. So this graphical abstract, the key point, okay, right. And some publishers, these are major publishers, now currently accept graphical abstracts as part of their paper submission. So once again, this is the influence of new media. And I'm really happy that these publishing companies are adapting with the times, right? So what makes a good graphical abstract? These are some guidelines for producing a good graphical abstract: logical flow, accuracy, relevance, etc., accessibility. But the most important thing from my perspective as far as producing a graphical abstract is to give the reader a simple introduction of the research, and especially if they are not specialists in that field. And so we're going to look at several examples of that. So for example, this is one good example of a graphical abstract. You can see this person is doing some research related to lungs, and they injected some chemical into rats and looked at the effect it had on the rats. So it's easy, even if you're a non-specialist in this field, to at least gain an overall understanding of the goal of this research. And similarly, this is another good example of a graphical abstract. This person did a study about glucose, and they had cases where there was no communication between subjects, or communication with friends, communication with strangers, and then did some measurements related to how that affected glucose and gave the graphical results. So this, again, is very easy. It conveys a lot of information in a simple, easy to understand way. And remember, conferences, I mean, if you're going to a conference with 8,000 attendees, it's pretty hard to stand out. If you want people to pay attention to your research, you need to make your graphical abstract as visually appealing as possible. Okay, and thirdly, this is yet another good example of a graphical abstract. You can see this person did a research study about trying to recycle medical supplies. They make a clear graphic about how much mass is associated with these medical supplies and how much pollution potentially it can produce, and saving resources, etc. So these are three good examples of graphical abstracts. Okay. And a video abstract follows sort of a similar theme. So a video abstract just gives a short introduction to your research, but in the form of a video. And especially now with the proliferation of video platforms worldwide, there are so many more opportunities to publish or disseminate your research in terms of video media. You might recall from the study that Inago did, the poll, that video abstracts were the least popular. Well, that might be, like I mentioned, because if you don't have a background in producing a video, that might take some effort. We can talk perhaps more about that in the Q&A session. Okay, and some publishing companies now accept video abstracts. So again, I'm happy that publishing companies are taking advantage of modern forms of media. Okay, so what makes a good video abstract? Brevity, clear structure. Again, you don't want to overwhelm the viewer with information in a similar way that the graphical abstract, it was simple, easy to understand, even if for a non-specialist. Well, a video should also be like that. Authenticity, context, etc. Accessibility. Okay, so now we're going to move on to plain language summaries. Plain language summaries are technical explanations of research findings written to be understood by a general audience without specialized knowledge. And this acts as a bridge between the scientific community and public understanding. And this can also increase the reach and impact of research beyond academia. So for a number of years in Beijing, I was on a committee that hosted public outreach talks by researchers there, both local Beijing-based researchers and visiting researchers. And the schedule was approximately monthly. So the committee would host approximately one talk per month. And as part of the process for preparing for these outreach lectures, we had to produce or ask the researcher who was going to deliver the lecture to produce a plain language summary of their work. So here's where you have to pay attention to technical language versus concepts or language that the general public would be more familiar with. Okay, and this slide gives an overview of this. What's the difference between plain language summary and an abstract? So the plain language summary provides a simple overview of a research study with no jargon or technical terminology. We don't necessarily have to say none, but at least minimal, right? Or if you use technical jargon, explain to the audience what that is, and caters to the general public, simplifies discipline-specific terms or concepts. And when I say the general public here, this can also mean researchers in other fields. So I remember when I was on that committee hosting the public outreach talks, I mean, a lot of the people who were both in the audience and on the committee were themselves researchers, but of course in different fields. Like a biologist might give a talk that includes the audience of a chemist or astronomer, etc. So in that case, you still have to write a plain language summary, whereas an abstract, by contrast, is really discipline specific, and you are targeting the colleagues in your field, and again use technical terminology. Okay, what makes a good plain language summary? And a lot of the same ideas. What is your audience? What's the purpose? What do you want your readers to remember? It has a lot of the same themes as previously, right? Except this time you're targeting to a more general audience. And it's better to speak in common language instead of really technical jargon. Or if you use technical jargon, minimally at least explain to the reader or the viewer what it is. Okay, so quickly we'll go through some examples. This is a plain language summary. The author introduces the context, the new findings, and the impact. So they just clearly give what their research findings are. Okay, again, just quickly go through context, new findings, impact. So that's sort of when you're doing these plain language summaries, think about the context and what's special about your research, and then what impact does it have. Okay, so now we're going to move on to infographics. And infographics are an entire field of study onto themselves. I mean, there are people who make their full-time job is to produce infographics. So, but with regard to scientific research study, infographics, again, they try to convey the most information in the simplest and most direct way possible, and especially not necessarily for experts in that field. And another aspect of this, which I encountered in the past, facilitates science communication across language barriers. So I worked in China for a number of years, and of course, there, the main language in China is not English. Okay, it's Mandarin or some dialect of Chinese. I mean, a lot of people, especially around Beijing, do in fact speak English, but there are even many researchers there who have limited English ability. So this is where the infographics come in. And of course, in many countries, that's true, not just in China where I worked. Facilitating science communication across language barriers, here's where you want the graphical aspect to become important. Okay, publishers that affect infographics. Here are some publication companies. Again, I'm happy that publication companies are embracing new methodologies in research publication. So types of infographics: statistical, process, comparison, timeline, anatomical, or structural. So this strongly depends on your research field. My background is in statistics and statistical analysis. So when I produce an infographic, I usually focus on some kind of statistical analysis or graph. However, if someone is working in biology or medicine, they would probably focus more on the anatomical aspects. Okay, what makes a good infographics? Effective visual presentation, a clear focus, accurate and compelling data visualization. Again, that is an entire field upon itself. Data visualization, someone can get even advanced degrees in data visualization. But it's not difficult to at least get started, even if you're not an specialist in data visualization. There are tools you can use to even get started. And we can talk more about this even in the Q&A session. Consistent style and color theme. So this aspect, I think, is very important. People, when they're trying to express contrasts or differing, some aspect of differing between their results, using contrasting colors is a very effective way to make that really apparent to the viewer. For example, blue and orange are really great contrasting colors. You can see in some presentations or graphs online, people try to use contrasting colors. Blue, dark blue, and orange make really, I mean, it is unmistakable which group is which. Red and green similarly. And when you're using colors, one thing to keep in mind is potentially the viewer may have some cultural background connected with colors. In a lot of the world, green is associated with good or positivity, like at a traffic light, green means go, whereas red maybe has negative connotations. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're producing infographics. Maybe if the viewer has some cultural connection to the colors, like red and green or blue and orange are good for contrasts. Okay, so this is a good example of an infographic. You can see this author used a blue theme. So they used light blue and dark blue, which is also good for contrast. And you can see they gave the title at the top, and it's really clear. This is in English. Remember, talking about infographics, if the viewer, they may speak or be fluent in a different language than you potentially. But you can see the graphical aspects are easy to understand, and there's a consistent color theme. So that's also, like we mentioned, important in infographics. Okay, a research press release. As I remember, this was one of the top choices when we did our poll. So a research press release is when you write a description of your research that is targeted towards a particular form of media. So it highlights the significant impact of your findings, and it helps control the narrative about your research findings. This does not necessarily have to be mass media. Even in fields, specific fields, there can be media that is targeted to those specific fields, or even at conferences. Some large conferences even have their own daily newspaper. And I have worked in the daily newspaper of a large conference before in Beijing. And in that case, I mean, we did receive many research press releases from the participants there. And but that was not targeted towards the general public, right? It was targeted towards the people attending that conference, which are generally not specialists in your field, but at least they have a background in your field of study. Okay, what makes a good press release? Compelling headline, context and relevance, clear, precise opening, etc. Quotations from researchers. Yes, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Okay, here is quickly an example of a press release. The person has a compelling headline. There's clear paragraphs and context, and they give an overview of their methodology. And then notably, they include a quotation. And I have been interviewed in the past by at least twice by reporters, science reporters, who asked if they could quote me in the article. I said, yes, no problem. If you're going to include a quote, it's better to get the permission of the person who's speaking, especially in science. So again, these press releases are usually not, or they may not necessarily be to a mass audience. They may be directed towards some form of media specific to your field. Okay, academic social networking sites. This was the second most popular choice, or tied with press releases in our own poll. So academic social networking sites are online platforms designed specifically for researchers, academics, and scholars to connect, collaborate, and share their work. And these platforms combine elements of social networking tailored to academic needs. Okay, and these are some examples of academic networking sites. To my knowledge, the most popular ones are LinkedIn and Orchid. I mean, specifically for academia. And this slide gives you an overview of how you can increase your impact with academic social networking sites, create and maintain a profile, engage in scholarly communication networks, build, I mean, if you create it, I guess that's basically the same thing as build a social networking profile, and monitor the progress. Okay, we're going to talk just a moment about some tools you can use to monitor the progress of your outreach efforts. Okay, when should you post? I have some good friends who post on their social network profiles, especially usually the number one is when they publish an article. The journal where I work even has our own social media manager. Her job is to, or at least part of her job is to manage the social media presence of our journal and to publicize some important articles. Some people publish on social media when they're going to attend a conference, or they have some, I mean, occasionally there are even live interactive sessions that people do, and that's also conferences. Some conferences have, you can go there in person or participate virtually. And so that's when people do live interactions on their social network. Okay, so this will give you an example of a LinkedIn profile. Okay, this is a good friend of mine. His name is Professor Richard DeGrees. He worked in China for approximately 10 years, and we cooperated on several projects. He has a really great profile on LinkedIn. In fact, many people would say this would be sort of the best example you can follow as far as having a meaningful social network presence on an academic social network. So he gives activities, he posts videos, he has his own website where he posts, and then he does training sessions, etc. And it describes his various positions he's had both in the past and now. Okay, the certifications and the different positions he's held over the years. Dr. DeGrees has published several books, and those are also listed on his social network profile, and awards where he had visiting professorships. Okay, so yeah, that was really a great example of a social networking profile. This one is more of an example of a general, directed towards a general audience, or at least a non-restrictive audience, right? LinkedIn is, it's not that, I mean, you have to be a member of LinkedIn, for example, to view LinkedIn posts. This one is on X. I think these are more public, or they may or may not be, but at least they're directed towards a broader audience. And this is an example of someone did a study involving cells, and they posted on X with their main thread, and they included photos and a link to their publication. So I personally, I haven't used this kind of and I'm not sure if Richard DeGrees has used X. I don't keep up with his X, but LinkedIn, yes, he is active on LinkedIn. This person, like I said, X is more directed towards a general audience, and maybe even the general public. Okay, the last topic we're going to mention is measuring your research impact. So we've talked about all these methods to generate research impact. So how do you go about measuring them once you've generated them? Well, there are several online platforms that allow you to sort of track your engagement, be they the blogs or the social network posts. I mean, and combined with more traditional methods like citations, right? So impact story, altmetric, plum analytics, these all have their own ways of tracking and measuring impact and engagement. Okay, so impact story allows researchers to discover metrics for their work from scholarly and popular social media. So it allows people to upload data sets, slide decks, scholarly products, etc. And it can interface with third-party services like ORCID. The researchers can highlight their key achievements on their profile and can get an idea of benchmarking. How do they benchmark their work compared with other researchers? Okay, this is just an example impact story. This person works at the University of Florida. This person mentions wiki and open access. They mention the number of times they've been shared or liked, mentioned on Wikipedia, etc. So this is just one example of how someone has measured their impact of their research using the modern methods that we have discussed. Okay, altmetric is another way. It has its own way of collecting the data and producing scores. So it gathers data from social media sources, blogs, mainstream media, etc. And it produces a score. The researchers are alerted whenever their work is mentioned, and they can endorse. I mean, researchers can endorse each other. So some colleagues of mine and I on LinkedIn, we have given endorsements to each other for various activities in the past, some skill or some achievement they've done or we've done. Again, this tool also lets people endorse each other. They can monitor online activity and discussions in real time. And like I said, that's more important usually at conferences, right? I mean, at conferences, they usually allow both in-person and remote activity, okay? And helps researchers benchmark their activity against others in the field. Okay, quickly, this is an example of an altmetric profile or dashboard. This person can clearly see how many mentions they have on various media sources, including blogs, social networking, etc. Okay. And then finally, Plum Analytics even uses its own way to track the way research impact, that a person conducts research impact. I think Plum Analytics more combines traditional methods with the blogging and modern methods. It more heavily relies on the traditional way, combined with the social media, whereas the other two more rely more heavily on social media. Okay, advantages of Plum Analytics: tracks 67 types of outputs, books, book chapters, posters, etc. Tracks multiple versions of the same article. This can be important because usually authors publish their article on a on an archive before it's actually accepted by the journal, right? So people can even read it before it's even accepted and potentially even cite it before it's accepted. Categorizes metrics for clear understanding, offers more sources of metrics. Okay, so this one, the advantage of Plum Analytics, like I mentioned, they combine more of the traditional way with the modern way. Okay, quickly, this is just an example of a Plum dashboard. The researcher here did a study about plants in Brazil, medicinal and poisonous plants, and they can keep track in real time their citations, social media, mentions, etc. Okay, and author level metrics. This determines the impact of an author based on a holistic level that tries to incorporate all the different methodologies we talked about. There are really a number of metrics that different organizations use, in addition to the traditional number of citations or number of citations within a certain time period. They have weighted index citations or normalized. There are many ways that different organizations keep track of the amount of citations and impact their research is having. Again, it's been a real pleasure delivering this lecture, and I wish you all the best of luck for your future endeavors. Okay, so good luck, and here we're going to end the presentation.